Hey y'all, good afternoon or morning or noon. It's Jeff again with some horseback wisdom. I wanted to do a real quick follow up to my video that I did yesterday about why Jesus is the only way to God. And I wanted to use an example. So I'm out here getting ready to decide whether I'm going to take down all these tomato plants or not. Tomato plant season is just about over, and I got to cover the greenhouse and get it ready for winter. But anyway, so here's a thought someone had. So if it's true that you can confess Jesus at any time and if you're sincere and be saved, why shouldn't you live your whole life the way you want to, and then at the last minute right before you die, confess Jesus and get the best of both worlds? Well, that's a pretty silly question, but a lot of people say that. A lot of people say, well, you know what? After I do all the things that I want to do, well, then I'll make time for God. The answer to that, the corollary to that is no, you won't. And let me give you an example of why. Everybody in America knows, they've made themselves pretty famous about the Navy SEALs. And I wasn't ever a Navy SEAL. I never went to BUD/S or any of that stuff. I was in the Navy, but I always had a lot of admiration for those guys that made it through and became Navy SEALs, because it's a really, really challenging thing. But what freaked me out, as I know some folks that are Navy SEALs, and what freaked me out was stories they told me of people who quit at the weirdest times. You see, apparently to become a Navy SEAL, the training is about a year, little over a year long. But it starts with this unbelievably hard thing called Basic Underwater Diving Scuba School, BUD/S. And that's an incredibly difficult iteration. And I don't even remember how many weeks it is. I think it's like 5 or 6 weeks or maybe more. But anyway, it has this one period that everybody kind of knows about at the end called Hell Week, where basically for 5 days they don't sleep. They just, and I've had Navy SEALs tell me they were just completely delirious. Like they didn't even know where they were. At the end of that, they were like staggering around. But they had the fortitude to finish. It's a completely admirable thing. So I'm thinking, well, okay, that everything's downhill from that point. And I found out that's not true at all. As a matter of fact, I had a Navy SEAL tell me that a guy in his training class, so apparently at the end of the one whole year of training, now you've already passed BUD/S, you've already gone through all the airborne training, free fall training, scuba training, all these other trainings. You've gone through all this incredible training, and at the very end, no, I don't know this, I'm just relaying what a friend of mine told me who's a Navy SEAL, that at the very end, they have to qualify with all these different weapons. And he told me that there was a guy in his group that had gone through almost an entire year of training and missed his weapons qualification by 1 point. In other words, let's say you had to have 100 points on your weapons quals, and this guy had like 99, and they said, you're out. Imagine that. And so that was bad enough because this guy didn't want to quit. He just couldn't shoot or whatever. But the story that freaked me out, and the one that relates to my reason why Jesus is the only way to God, and how it's stupid to think that you'll just eventually choose God, is that another Navy SEAL said when they went to go airborne training, that was okay, right? Because I think they go to the Army Airborne School, so it's like you run in platoons, and they have these huge towers and they drop you off, and it's still pretty scary, but it's, hundreds of thousands of people have gone through that. The Army is really good at teaching people to jump out of an airplane. But then they have to go to free fall school, because Navy SEALs have, like Green Berets and stuff, have to be able to do free fall. And that's a whole nother ball of wax, right? You're not up there with a static line that's going to pull your chute for you and all that. This guy told me that, so, and they've gone through basic underwater diving school, they've gone through scuba training and drown proofing and all of this other stuff. And they went through airborne training, and then they go to, and I think they went to some other kind of like wilderness survival training, which is really hard. And then they went to this free fall school, and he said a bunch of guys quit at free fall school. And I'm thinking to myself, what? Like, how do you make it through Navy SEAL Hell Week and be afraid to jump out of an airplane? I mean, you've been a week without sleep. You've been in the ocean when it's, Catalina Island's freezing cold. I've surfed there before. It's freezing cold, 36-degree water. How in the world do you quit at that point? And he said there were guys that when that airplane went up, now they've already been through airborne training, they've been through all this other SEAL training, but they're sitting in this little Caribou aircraft or whatever, and they get up to altitude, and you got to hang off the outside of the airplane and then let go with your instructor. He said a whole bunch of guys just quit right there. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. He said it was crazy. And so what that told me about human behavior is our minds tell us that we're going to do something, but it's a trick, right? Have you ever been somewhere and you said, oh yeah, that's easy, I can do that. And then you got there and you were like, oh no, that ain't happening, right? Some people that happens on like an amusement park ride. Some people that happens on a bridge. Some people that happens on a boat, right? Some people that happens on airplanes. And for these guys that had already been through the most difficult training in the world, Navy SEAL basic underwater diving training, they've already completed that successfully. Out of a class of like 250 guys, like 22 or 23 will make it. I mean, it's crazy. And they already did that. They were strong enough to get through that. But when they got up in that aircraft at 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 feet, and they had to get out of the airplane and jump out, they were like, nope, bye, Felicia. You know what that told me was, if you're thinking that, you know what, I'm just going to live the way I want to, and then I'll accept God later on. No, you won't. You're going to be like those Navy SEAL guys. You may have gone through some really difficult stuff. You may have been super successful at what it is that you've been wanting to do. But when it comes down to it, the devil's going to tell you, you know what? You're not going to accept God. You don't need God. He's going to tell you, you know what? Look at all the things you've done without God. Look at all the women or the men, if you're a woman. Look at all the money you made. Look at all the great things you can do yourself. You don't need God. He's going to tell you that. And he's not just going to tell it to you. He's going to put that in your mind. Not only that, guess what else he might do? He might kill you. You see, Bible tells us over and over again that the devil can ask for your life. Jesus said to the apostles, he said, the devil, Satan, has asked God to kill you, to sift you like wheat. And I have prayed, Jesus said, that your faith will not fail you. In other words, Satan went to God and said, hey, let me kill all these apostles. I want them. You don't know when you're going to die. There's a great book. Everybody should read it. It's called All My Friends Are Dead. It's by an evangelist by the name of Freddie Gage. I don't know if you can still get it. It's an older book. It's called All My Friends Are Dead. He was a drug dealer. God radically changed his life and told him, you're going to go back to all these people that you sold drugs to, all the people that you bought drugs from, and you're going to share them my son, Jesus Christ. He did that. And guess what? None of them accepted Jesus, and they all died. Some of them died the next day in a gunfight. Some of them were hit by a car. Some of them died of a heart attack. But they all died without God. And if that happens, that's it. That's eternal, folks. So do not have the foolish nonsense idea that the devil puts in people's minds that you don't need God right now. Just like those Navy SEAL guys that, and actually they didn't become Navy SEALs. They didn't get the insignia because they didn't make it all the way through. They made it through the most, what I can't believe, they made it through the most incredibly difficult thing. I can't even imagine that. And yet when they got up in that airplane, they quit because they were like, nope, I'm not jumping out of an airplane like this. And they had already been through basic airborne training. But you know what? You never know what's going to happen. You never know how you're going to react until you're in that moment. Choose Jesus now. He's the only way. If you don't know that, go back and watch the video before this one. But I don't want any of you to not be in heaven with me. Love you and be blessed.